Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing NCIS Origins, Season 1, Episode 11. So before I get into the review, I want to thank everybody who likes, watches, subscribes, comments. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you. So thank you for that. So getting into this episode, the very beginning of the episode is you see Frank's, but the first thing you hear is Mark Harmon, right? He's narrating as an older Gibbs, which we all love Mark Harmon, right? So he's kind of narrating as Frank's is getting ready in the morning, just getting dressed, and he's kind of narrating what it takes to be the boss, the long nights, and just everything that kind of goes into being the boss. Which is what Mike Franks is. So, as you're seeing him kind of get ready for work, he's putting on his cowboy boots, which we all know, Mike Franks, he always wears cowboy boots. If you haven't noticed, you can probably go back in past episodes and he's always wearing them. He kind of puts his boots on the desk when he's looking at papers and kind of just hanging out. So you definitely notice that. So he's putting on his boots and they break. So, and normally when boots break, especially cowboy boots, a lot of people do try to get them repaired because cowboy boots are usually expensive if it's a good pair. So, but he kind of runs to Tish and is like, hey, can you bring this to your boot guy? And she's like, I don't know. The last time he repaired it, he says they're kind of a lost cause. But he was like pleading with her, right? So it kind of tells you right away. You don't find Mike Franks to be a sentimental guy. So when you see him kind of carrying on like that, he really cares for these boots and really wants them to be repaired, then you kind of think, what do these boots mean? Like, was it a special gift or do they remind him of something? So you kind of think that right away. At least I do, because Mike Franks just doesn't seem like the touchy-feely kind of guy, even though he has his moments. So, Tish says she'll try, and then he wears like sneakers. And of course, everybody right away notices his shoes, right? And they go to the crime scene, and, when you first get there, they notice that, that the young man has a bullet in his head. So they're like, okay, somebody shot him. When they roll him over, they see the gun. So obviously, the first thing they come up with was that it was a suicide, because that's pretty much, typically what a suicide would look like, right? So that's how they want to handle it till they find out who the deceased is, which is Cameron Reed. So when they get back, Gibbs is a young Gibbs. He's taken all the photographs, right? And they get back, and Layla even says, like, how come you haven't started the board? And he's like, well, it's a suicide, right? And then you find out, no, even when it's a suicide, they still do what they call a death investigation, which I think is great. I think that's, a good thing. And according to, what Mike Frankson says is like, the family needs to have answers. So even if it's suicide, we still get answers, do a murder board, investigate. And it's just called, instead of a homicide, it's called a death investigation. So right off the bat, obviously a young Gibbs doesn't know that. So he's like, okay. And I kind of like that because it seems very respectable, especially with military, respected to give that family that closure. Like, we double check everything. So you find out that Cameron Reed's father, Alexander Reed, he is a 3-star general. So, very big deal in the military. When they go into his office, you see all of his awards and, the documents that are framed on his wall, all of his certificates. And awards. So, he even said, he's like, look, not that I don't read. He says, I'm not a big reader, which implies, hey, I want verbal updates. I don't want you to send me a bunch of reports. I want you to physically come to my office and tell me what's going on with the investigation, which I think is fair. I think he was very straightforward, very upfront, which I expect him to be. It kind of reminds me of an older Gibbs. Gibbs was very much that way. And you see a lot of people, if you watch the regular NCIS, they come in contact with a lot of people that are that way. So they understand they need to give him updates, right? And then, of course, there's the little side story with his cowboy boots. So when Mike Franks finds out that he's a 3-star general and he's coming to NIS for an update, he's like, Randy, give me your loafers, right? So he wears Randy's loafers because he wants to be respectful. He's like, I'm not walking in to see a 3-star general in tennis shoes. Like, I'm going to respect the man. So I like that. I thought that was, Mike Franks not just not wanting to look bad, but respecting, respecting the rank, and wanting to look presentable. So I kind of liked that too. And, throughout the case, there's some things that make you want to think it is a homicide. No residue on his hands, which I thought was interesting because they said with a lot of suicide cases, it's not guaranteed that they're going to have the residue. So I thought that was interesting. I just assumed if you handled a gun, you would always have residue. But what do I know? I don't know anything about it. So I thought that was interesting. They were like, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't. So they go through the investigation, and obviously the dad's like, look, I've already done my homework here, all of the people that are associated with my son, and basically gave him files of, a suspect list, which I didn't expect anything less. He's a 3-star general and his son has been killed. So, they definitely keep you guessing throughout the episode. They talked to a neighbor. She didn't give the police a statement. She says she doesn't open the door for cops, but Franks wanted to go back to the crime scene. And I think Gibbs learns this later on, because I feel like an older Mark Harmon Gibbs in the regular NCIS show always says, let's go back to the scene of the crime, go back to where it started. So I thought that was interesting when you saw Franks go, I'm going back to the scene of the crime. I'm going back to where it started. So, I definitely like that. I feel like at some point Gibbs is going to pick up on that, since he does that too. And that's when he saw the neighbor. The neighbor was like, no, I didn't give a statement, but the walls are thin. And you found out a key piece of information, that he's normally alone, but she heard him with another person who was drunk and said he was going to come back with a gun. So right away you think, okay, this guy, if you can identify him, he came back with the gun and killed him, right? However, you find out, they do find the guy, and he did come back with the gun, but he was selling it to Cameron, the victim. So he said, like, look, Cameron said he wanted a gun. I brought it to him that night. He paid me $200. I went to Vegas. It seemed like he was off, but, he asked for it. I gave it to him. And when they got there, Mike Franks, I don't think it was Franks. I think it was Gibbs. He found a pamphlet for a veteran support group. Yeah, Gibbs found it because you can see him later in the episode with it. I think he was debating on using it himself, but they did interview the people at the organization. I don't think he went to a meeting or had any association with it, but nevertheless, he had the pamphlet in his apartment. So, of course, they go through all the leads. But apparently, even though his dad was a 3-star general, he struggled with what he saw in Kuwait. So from what we're hearing from his friend, he had a lot of emotional, maybe PTSD, we don't know. He just had a lot of emotion of what went on in Kuwait. And he was actually a couple days off of leaving for Somalia. So, his friend was like, maybe he didn't want to go to Somalia, and they're like, so he offed himself so he wouldn't have to go to Somalia. How bad could it have been? Well, he was thinking it was as bad as Kuwait, which obviously had a deep impact on him, because we're finding out he seemed like he was depressed. His friend who gave him the gun even said he was off. Now, why would you give somebody a gun who said, and you yourself think it's off? He said it was for security, that the apartment had some robberies, but he said himself, that's what he said the reason he wanted the gun, but I didn't really believe it. He was kind of off, but I gave it to him anyways, took the $200 and went to Vegas to gamble. So, I mean, right there, obviously he's not to blame. He probably would have got a gun somewhere else. I always say if somebody wants to do something, they're going to do it. You know, there's a lot of ways to kill yourself. It doesn't have to be with the gun. So, yeah, if he felt like he was off, he probably shouldn't have sold him the gun. But if somebody wants something done, most of the time they're going to do it with or without your help. So I'm not going to say this kid was the sole reason on why he committed suicide, because he could have just hung himself or something if he didn't have the gun. So that being said, I think he was a troubled soul, and it was really sad that he didn't feel like he could communicate with his dad. His dad was a 3-star general. He's suffering through this. And I guess he felt alone. The neighbor said he was always alone. So that's just a little kind of life lesson that's difficult. I kind of see similar case with McGee and regular NCIS. His dad was an admiral, admiral. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Admiral in the Navy, and I feel like McGee could never go to his dad, talk about his feelings. I feel like this is a similar matter. However, McGee was able to go a different way, and I don't think he's depressed or emotional at all. I love McGee. He's one of my favorite characters in the regular NCIS. But I mean, seems a similar case. Cameron, has a dad with all the credentials, and he didn't feel comfortable talking to him, and going back to Somalia was really difficult, and he did what he did. So I don't condone it at all, but I just feel like, we need to pay more attention to our friends and our family. There's signs, and we need to pick up on them. I think it's the same way with kids. Kids need to have somebody safe to talk to. I always tell that to, my kids: if you don't feel safe talking to me, talk to your grandma, talk to your dad, talk to somebody, because you need to express that. I hope you can always come to me, but if you don't, then go to somebody. I hope my nieces and nephews feel they can come talk to me if they can't talk to my brother, my sister. Like, they have to have an outlet. And I'm not going to debate whether it should be a member of the family or a parent. It has to be somebody, right? I'm not going to be upset if my family members go to somebody else. They just need to speak with somebody. So I just think it's really sad in this case that Cameron felt like he had nobody to talk to. He had the pamphlet for the support group, but we don't really know if he used it at all. So this kind of being sad with it being confirmed as suicide, the side note that I want to talk about is the cowboy boots with Franks. So we saw a lot of flashbacks with Franks. I didn't really touch on it. I kind of went straight to the case and discussed it, but there were a couple flashbacks. So you find out the significance of the boots. So I personally don't know much about Mike Franks. Watching him through NCIS with Gibbs, you don't really know a lot about his background, right? So this was eye-opening to me, because this episode, in my opinion, 100% focused on Mike Franks. I feel like we saw Gibbs for a very short amount of time. And we heard Mark Harmon, as the older Gibbs, start the episode talking about being the boss. He also ended the episode saying he basically looked up to Franks, and he ended the episode narrating Mark Harmon saying, I know what I need to do to be the boss. So, I mean, it's telling you Mark Harmon is watching Franks, watching what he does. So it starts out with him being, this is what the boss has to do, and it ends the episode with Mark Harmon saying, now I know, you know what I mean, what I would have to do to be like him. So that's kind of the narrating of the whole episode. To go back to kind of harp on what happened with the cowboy boots, which I think was interesting, right? They show a flashback. His 21st birthday, he gets the cowboy boots as a present from his mom and his older brother Mason. So it turns out Mike Franks has an older brother. They give it to him as a birthday present. He loves the boots. You see another flashback of him taking his boot off, and then his entire foot is just bloody, right? Because boots are brutal to wear in, so to speak. So, you see his feet bloody. He still loves the boots. Mason, his brother, sees that, and he takes off his cowboy boots, gives them to Mike, and says, I'll wear in your boots. So, I mean, obviously, he looked up to his brother. I mean, his brother treated him very well. It looks like they were, they had a farm. They were, it was a farm in Texas. He was like, oh, a couple cows got away. And, it just seemed like they were a good brotherly bond, right? He gives him this really nice birthday present for his 21st birthday. And then when he sees his brother's feet bleeding, he doesn't even think. He just takes his boots off and gives them to Mike and says, I'll wear them in, right? And then you see another flashback where a man comes and he's in uniform, and basically Mike Franks is being drafted for the Vietnam War. And his brother's like, I'm going to take care of it. And Mike Franks is like, no, I don't want to, hide away from the draft. I'll never be able to come back and see you and Mom and see you on the farm. So they have a little bit of an argument because apparently Mike Franks is being drafted, because this is back in the day where you were drafted to go to war. And basically his older brother was like, Mom and I talked about it, go to Mexico or wherever you need to go, and we're going to, hide you from the draft. And Mike Franks was like, no, I'm going. And his brother was a little annoyed, but he spoke up to his brother, which, from what we can see from the flashback, took a lot of guts for Mike Franks to do that. He idolized his older brother. And the last scene in the flashback is you see him getting ready to go. And his older brother goes, okay, well, if you're really going to go, I'm going with you. But we're not going to be in the Army. We're going to be Marines. So, I mean, that was such a touching scene. Like, hey, if you're going to stand up to me and you're going to do the right thing and you really are going to go to the draft, be drafted and go to the Vietnam War, I'm coming with you. And you see the mom kind of crying and waving as now both of her sons are going off to war. So, and that's the last of the flashbacks. There's like 3 or 4 flashbacks throughout the episode. I just talked about the case first. Basically, it implies, in my opinion, it implies that, Mike Franks' older brother dies in the war. Maybe not, but he is holding on to this pair of cowboy boots as if it was gold. You know what I mean? I told you at the beginning of the episode, he's begging her to find, a repair shop. And then towards the end of the episode, you see him reunite with Tish when he comes home that night. And Tish goes, I went to 3 other stores. We have a new boot guy. So she went to the regular guy that they go to, and I guess he couldn't fix it. She went to 3 other places. So Trish went to 4 boot places total in one day to fix this pair of boots. For Mike Franks. So, I've mentioned it before in my other videos. Mike and Tish, I know I say Mike Franks is sexist, and I believe it. In those times, that's just the way he was, and it, the society encouraged it, unfortunately, to look down on women and kind of have that opinion, but he respected and loved Tish. I don't know, how they got together, but he respects her. And he was very grateful that she went to 3 other places and fixed his boots. So that's why I think his older brother died, because he is holding on to these boots like it is the last memory he has. It is like a dear, treasure. You see people who have these antiques in their house. They don't cost that much, but it's a family heirloom. It's just something that has been passed down that means a lot to them. These cowboy boots is like an heirloom to Mike Franks, in my opinion. They mean a lot to him. They showed us 3 or 4 flashbacks throughout the entire episode focusing on him in the boots, right? So I'm definitely glad it ended well and he got his boots back. But it was definitely a different episode. Like I said, it angled around Franks. Very few scenes with Gibbs in it. At one point, Randy was going to set up Gibbs with his wife's friend who was a school teacher. He said he's not ready, and then Layla was like, oh, Randy, you were going to set somebody up with Gibbs? Well, you better make sure they're good enough, which I thought was sweet, but I just feel like it's trying to imply there's something between Gibbs and Layla. I know Layla really likes Gibbs as a person. I'm sure there's some love interest there, but honestly, I like them to stay friends, because we've seen with Gibbs, no woman is going to replace his dead wife, right? So, Shannon and Kelly, nobody's ever going to replace him. I don't ever see him having children again. Well, we know he doesn't, but I hope Layla becomes one of those women friends that he doesn't get involved with, that he can rely on, because we see he doesn't have anybody like that in his life. However, Layla was a little weary, like, oh, you're setting up Gibbs? Oh, okay, well, who is this person you're setting Gibbs up with? So I don't know what that implies, if later on we're going to see them get together. I don't know. Is the series NCIS Origins, are they going to show us where he marries his 3 wives, right? Because we know he gets married again. But this episode was a good episode. However, it was mainly about Mike Franks. I did enjoy seeing that he had a brother, seeing that softer side, seeing a little bit about his background. However, again, I say this in most of my videos, you showed that NCIS Origins was about Gibbs. So I always say, let's get back to the show being about Gibbs, the main character. I love Layla. I love Mike Franks. I love their characters. The actors and actresses in this show are very good. I love Mary Jo. I love everybody that acts in this show. But to get back to your fans, CBS, you advertised the show as about Gibbs. So let's get back to Gibbs. Even though it was nice to see a different side of Mike Franks. I hope you enjoyed my review. If you have any questions, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.